Story 1. The Man with the Lantern That Faced Backward. It was mid-October when I set out for a solo hike into the lower ridges near the Pisgah stretch of the Blue Ridge. That time of year, the trees were half naked, and the trail was covered in that perfect mix of brittle reds and golden browns. It was the kind of air that clears your chest, not just your lungs. I'd been meaning to do a weekend alone for months. No phone, no talking, no noise. Just the woods, the cold, and me. I picked a lesser-known offshoot of the Mountains to Sea Trail, one an old co-worker mentioned in passing. No online maps, no foot traffic. He'd called it Dogbone Hollow, though I didn't see it marked as such on any signage. Still, it had that name in my head when I stepped onto it that Saturday morning. The first day was uneventful, quiet, beautiful. I passed a pair of deer near the ridgeline, their white tails flickering in and out of brush like ghosts. Made camp just before dusk on a flat clearing surrounded by laurel and maple with a small trickling creek nearby. I remember thinking I hadn't heard a single plane overhead all day, hadn't seen another soul, not a boot print or broken stick that wasn't mine. It should have been peaceful. Around midnight, I woke up to a strange tapping sound. Not close, maybe a couple 100 feet down the ridge. Rhythmic. I thought maybe a branch swinging in the wind or maybe a raccoon. I wasn't scared. Not yet. I lay there listening, half dozing again when I saw the glow. Faint at first, like a candle or an old gas lantern, flickering yellow through the trees. It bobbed as it moved, slow but steady, coming up from the dark gully where the trail curved down. I sat up in my sleeping bag, blinking hard. Someone was night hiking. That was my first thought, which was odd but not impossible. Maybe a hunter, maybe a camper who got turned around. But the longer I watched, the more I realized something wasn't right. The glow wasn't illuminating in front of the person. It wasn't casting light forward onto the trail. It was facing the other way, back behind them, toward me. Still, they moved forward, confident and unflinching, never turning to adjust, never scanning the ground. I should have called out. That's the part I think about a lot. I should have said something, a simple, "Hey," or "You lost?" But I didn't. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. I wasn't frozen with fear. Not yet. It was more like the woods themselves hushed me, like something deeper than fear pressed against my chest, told me to stay still. The figure kept walking, never breaking pace. Just the bobbing glow of that backwards lantern growing closer until it stopped about 30 feet away, just beyond a curtain of brush and shadow. Then the light dipped, like the person crouched. I couldn't see them anymore. Just that dull glow through the leaves. I waited. Minutes passed, then the light started moving again, but this time back the way it came, receding down the hill until it vanished entirely into black. I didn't sleep much the rest of the night. When the sky lightened a few hours later, I packed my gear in record time. I decided not to stay the second night. It didn't feel right. The woods felt wrong. Not threatening exactly, but hollow, like the sound had been sucked out of the trees. No birdsong, no insects, not even the soft crackle of wind through dead leaves. Just stillness, watching stillness. I started heading back the way I came, but within the first mile I realized something was wrong. The trail markers were missing. The faint orange ribbons tied around saplings, gone. The natural bends I remembered didn't match. Trees leaned in places they hadn't. I retraced steps that weren't mine. And worse, my compass needle spun uselessly every time I tried to get a fix. I didn't have GPS. By design. I wanted to be off-grid, just me and the land. That was the point, right? By noon, I was walking in circles. I stopped drinking water out of habit, trying to ration. The air felt denser, like walking through cotton. That afternoon I found a tree with bark peeled off in long strips, exposing a pale, rotting core. Carved into it, crudely, were 3 parallel slashes. Fresh, still wet. The kind of mark someone makes when they don't want to speak out loud but still want you to know they were there. I kept walking, legs numb, sun bleeding low and gold through trees that all looked the same. At dusk, I passed the same twisted log I'd passed hours earlier. I knew then I wasn't getting out that night. I had no choice but to camp again. I built no fire, ate nothing, just sat under the tarp with my knife in hand, staring out into blackness, listening. At some point in the early dark, the light came back. Same direction, same movement, soft bobbing, quiet and deliberate. I couldn't see the person clearly, just the shape of a figure, shoulders hunched slightly, a head forward. The lantern glowed behind him, not ahead, and as he moved, that light kept hitting my camp like it was aimed precisely at me the whole time. This time he walked past, didn't stop, moved parallel to the camp, just beyond the line of trees, and when he passed out of view, the woods swallowed the light completely. At dawn, I ran. No pack, no gear, just the bottle of water and my jacket. I don't remember how long I ran, only that the sky turned from grey to white, and then, finally, blue. I burst out onto an old fire road sometime mid-morning, where 2 volunteers from a nearby park station were clearing brush. They looked at me like I'd crawled out of the ground. One of them asked if I was from the college group that cancelled last minute. I didn't answer. I just kept walking until I found my car, still parked under wet leaves, cold to the touch. I didn't tell anyone. Not at first. What would I say? But 4 days later, after I'd gotten home and started going through my gear, I found something I can't explain. I always carry a small GoPro, not for posting, just for stitching time lapses when I hike. I hadn't turned it on once before that trip, didn't even think to, but when I checked the SD card, there was a single image, a still photo. It was me, sleeping in my bag. Fire burned low beside me. And in the background, just beyond the flicker of flame, stood that same backwards lantern, glowing, just floating there, mid-air. I don't remember taking that photo. I don't remember anyone being close enough to take it. I still don't know what I saw out there. Maybe it was a hiker, maybe it was a trick of the trees and light. But sometimes, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I swear I see that same flicker through the bedroom window, bobbing, waiting, facing me. Story 2. Her hair was caught in the bark. It was 3 summers ago, and I was about 6 weeks into my seasonal contract with the Park Service, clearing brush and maintaining the lesser-traveled trails around Whitetop. Most of the younger guys didn't like being out there alone for more than a day or 2, but I'd always been drawn to the quiet, the kind of silence you don't get anywhere else, just wind through branches, the dry snap of twigs under your boots, the occasional whip-poor-will calling from somewhere unseen. That job didn't pay much, but I wasn't doing it for the money. I liked the solitude. I liked being so deep in the woods that it felt like the rest of the world had been peeled away. And sometimes, I liked feeling just a little bit invisible. That week, I was posted along a narrow spur trail that curved up a ridge to an overlook no one really visited anymore. The path was old, eaten up by years of runoff, barely wide enough for 2 boots to walk side by side. There was something strange about that stretch, the way the trees bent in toward the path, their upper branches curling down like crooked fingers. It felt like walking through a crowd that didn't want you there. But I chalked it up to erosion and mountain wind patterns. You can explain anything if you want to badly enough. Around midday, I stopped to catch my breath and drink some water, leaning against the trunk of a maple that had split open along one side. That's when I noticed it. Long strands of black hair tangled in the bark. Not just one clump, either. 3 different trees in a 10-foot radius had it. Thick, dark, slightly wavy hair, caught high up where someone's shoulders or neck might brush if they were tall. Too tall. At first I assumed it was deer fur, but it was too long, too human. I laughed, maybe a little too loud. Figured it was some kind of prank. Or maybe some hiker with dreadlocks had passed through months ago. Hair gets caught on branches all the time, right? Still, something about it stuck with me. I snapped a picture on my old phone, just to show the crew later, and kept moving. I set up my lean-to off-trail on a slight slope above the switchback, about an hour before sunset. After my dinner cold, I watched the trees bleed into silhouette. That's the part I remember most clearly, the way those trees looked after dark. Like they weren't just standing, like they were waiting. I fell asleep to the sound of cicadas and one owl hooting somewhere low in the valley. The kind of Appalachian quiet that presses against your ears, full but never loud. I woke up sometime past midnight, though I couldn't tell you the exact hour. It wasn't a sharp awakening, no branch snapping or animal rustling. Just a slow slide into alertness, like something had entered my dreams and brought me with it when it left. At first, all I heard was wind, but then the wind changed. It wasn't brushing through branches anymore. It was brushing through something softer, fibrous, a slow dragging sound, like strands of something catching against bark. Not quite a rustle, not quite a scrape, just pulling. I lay there frozen, listening to it move from one side of the trees to the other. Long, deliberate drags like someone brushing their hair against the trunks. Then came the humming, low, tuneless, a woman's voice. Just under her breath, as if she didn't know she was doing it. The kind of sound you make when you've been alone too long and forget what silence is supposed to be. I didn't want to move, but I reached slowly for my flashlight, clicked it on. The beam sliced through the dark like a blade and lit up absolutely nothing. No figure, no eyes reflecting back, just trees and shadows. But the humming stopped, and that dragging sound, gone too. What replaced it was worse. Thick, black sap began running down the trunks of the 3 trees nearest to me. It gleamed in the light like oil, sticky and slow, tracing paths down the bark in sluggish rivulets. I stood up, bare feet sinking into moss and damp earth. The trees were bleeding, there's no other way to put it, and the hair gone. Every strand I'd seen earlier was missing, like it had never been there. I backed into the lean-to, locked my jaw so hard it hurt. I didn't sleep. Just sat there with the light on until morning turned the sky a pale grey-blue. When I finally worked up the nerve to check the trees, the sap had dried into thick black streaks. The bark looked charred like it had been burned from the inside, but there was no fire smell, no ash, just rot. I packed up in silence, didn't eat, didn't even brush my teeth. I just started walking. I made it about 3 miles before my calves started to burn. I thought it was just the steep incline, but when I rolled my pant legs up, I found fresh scratches along the backs of both legs. Thin, shallow claw marks, like something had dragged me through the underbrush. But I hadn't fallen, hadn't even tripped. I told myself I must have scratched them during the night. Maybe I got up and wandered without knowing it. Maybe. Later that day, I ran into an old-timer named Eli at one of the ranger sheds. He'd worked those woods back in the 70s, long before GPS and drone maps. Said he knew every ridge by memory. I asked him about that stretch of trail, the one with the inward-leaning trees, told him about the hair, about the sap. I left out the humming. He didn't laugh, didn't smile either. He just stared at the floor and said, "You found the listening trees, didn't you?" I asked what he meant. He said that's what his grandfather called them. Said there was a part of the mountain where the trees leaned in to hear secrets, where women used to go to bury shame, or grief, or babies no one was allowed to talk about. He said if you walk through there with something heavy on your chest, the trees remember it. He said they always take something in return. I told him I didn't believe in that kind of thing. He said, doesn't matter. I haven't been back since. Don't plan to. But sometimes when I'm lying in bed with the window cracked just enough to let in the breeze, I swear I hear that same humming, low, mindless. Like it's searching for something to hold on to. And a few weeks ago, I found a clump of long black hair tangled in the vent by my bedroom floor. No one else lives here. I keep it locked, always have. But locks don't work on what's already listening. Story 3. The Figure Beneath the Bent Cross. It was late September when I went hiking with my cousin, Will. He was always the one dragging me into places we probably shouldn't go. Half curiosity, half something heavier that he never talked about. That trip was supposed to be simple, just 2 days out on some half-forgotten loop near Mount Rogers, up past Troutdale. Old growth country. Thicker woods than you'd think still existed around here. But Will had found an old topo map from the 50s at a yard sale, and there was a thin, dotted line, scrawled in red pencil, leading off a decommissioned fire road. No name on it, no mile marker, just a note scribbled in the margin that said, Church Foundation, Stone Ruins, Cross Bent. That was enough for him, and because I never really said no to Will, that's how we ended up standing at a moss-choked gate with a rusted chain across it, staring down a trail that hadn't seen a boot print in 60 years. We hopped on it without much talk. The trail wasn't overgrown like I expected, just strange. The trees leaned inwards on both sides like they'd grown curious about us. The deeper we went, the quieter everything got. Not just less birdsong. It was like the woods themselves didn't want to breathe too loud. You know that feeling when the forest is holding its breath? It was like that, but stretched over an entire afternoon. By the time we found the ruins, the sun was skimming low through the branches, casting everything in that amber glow that makes things look prettier and more haunted at the same time. The church, or what was left of it, sat in a shallow hollow, just a partial stone foundation, thick with weeds. Ivy ran like veins along the edges. You could see the outline of where a nave might have been, maybe a doorway. A few crumbling stones in a half-circle formation near what might have been the altar. But the strangest part was the iron cross. It was thick, old, maybe 6 feet high and heavy with rust. It wasn't broken, just bent, slumped forward at a crooked angle like something had pushed it with deliberate force. And beneath it, in the dirt, lay a man. At first I thought it was a statue, the way he lay so perfectly still. But his clothes were modern, jeans, a grey thermal. His boots were caked in dry mud. He had short, dark hair and a thin face. Eyes wide open, mouth closed. No wounds. No blood, just lying there, hands by his sides like someone had gently set him down. Neither of us moved for a long time. I whispered, Will, do you see that? He didn't answer, just stared. I stepped closer, maybe 3 feet from him, until I could see the man's eyes weren't cloudy or glassy like in the movies. They were alert, alive, but still unmoving. Like he was watching something from far away, like whatever he saw had already happened, and he just never stopped looking at it. Then, without warning, Will grabbed my arm and pulled me back hard, said, We need to go, now. We didn't run, not at first. We backed up slowly, then turned and hiked fast. The trail back felt longer, like we'd descended into something we weren't meant to reach, and now it was fighting to keep us. Trees didn't look the same. A heavy stillness followed us. When we got back to the gate, the chain was gone. I don't remember driving back to town. I just remember sitting on Will's porch with him later that night. Neither of us said much. He looked pale, like he hadn't blinked in hours. Finally, I asked him what made him pull me away. He said, "He looked at me." I said, "But his eyes were open the whole time." Will just shook his head. "No, he wasn't looking at us, not until I thought his face looked like mine." I laughed nervously. "You're losing it." But he didn't laugh. He didn't even blink. We went back the next morning, brought 2 rangers from the local office. We told them about the ruins, about the man. I expected to get laughed out of the building, but one of them, Carl, I think, just nodded slowly and said, "All right, let's take a look." We led them straight back. The trail still showed our boot prints. I remember that clearly. But when we reached the hollow, the foundation was gone. The ivy, too. The place was just a depression in the woods, filled with dead leaves and a ring of blackened grass like something had burned there decades ago. No stones, no iron cross, no man. The rangers searched around for a bit, but it was clear they didn't see what we had. Carl pulled me aside while the other guy talked to Will. He said, "You boys weren't the first to come looking for that place." I asked him what he meant, and he told me about a pair of surveyors in 1989 who'd gone off map chasing a similar old trail. Only one of them came back. Said he found a church that wasn't there the next day. Carl said his dad used to talk about an old congregation out that way, before the floodplain shifted in the 30s. Said they'd meet in secret. Said the preacher was the one who forged that iron cross himself, that it bent the day they buried him. We didn't speak on the ride home. Will looked like he was going to throw up the whole time. I tried to joke, tried to make it lighter. Said maybe we'd seen some backwoods squatters and imagined the rest. But Will didn't hike anymore after that. Sold his gear, quit his job with the Forest Service, moved back to Ohio. The last time I saw him was 2 years ago, and he looked thinner, sleep-deprived. Said he still dreams of the man beneath the cross. Said he stands in Will's room now. Just stand, doesn't speak, until he does. And when he does, he says only one thing. "Your turn." I try not to think about it too much. Try to stay off old trails. But sometimes, when I'm deep in the woods, I'll come across a patch where the trees grow just a little too far apart, and the silence gets just a little too sharp. And I think about that bent cross, that watching man, and how one day, if I'm not careful, I might lie down beneath it too. Story 4. The woman who stepped out of the fog. It was early October, and the leaves had already started to thin out near the high trails. I was solo camping just off a cut of the Mountains to Sea trail that ran near Craggy Gardens, north side, away from the overlooks where most folks set up for the view. I'd gone in deeper, maybe a mile off the path where a ridge dropped into a little grove of sourwood and spruce. It was quiet. Still, I'd picked the spot on instinct. I just wanted to be alone. Away from voices and reception, away from the world that was crowding in on me. That evening had been uneventful. Just the usual stuff. Set up camp, boiled some rice and jerky, watched the trees go black against a fading red sky. There was no moon, and the stars blinked in late, like they were shy. I remember how silent it got once the fire burned down. No crickets, no owls, just wind running soft through branches like a whisper you couldn't quite hear. The kind of silence that doesn't feel empty, but full, like something's holding its breath. Around 4 a.m., I woke up. I don't know why. My body just kicked on like it knew something I didn't. The fog had rolled in while I slept, dense and low, curling through the trees like smoke. I couldn't see more than 10-15 feet past my top. Everything looked damp, muffled. Then I heard it, singing, faint. So faint I thought maybe it was my own head at first. But then it came again, an old tune, maybe Appalachian, a lullaby or hymn, no instruments, just one soft voice repeating a few slow bars with no real words. Just humming, then a line or two, then more humming. It was coming from somewhere out in the trees, not far. I sat up, heart doing that slow pound you feel in your throat more than your chest. I didn't move, just listened. The voice grew louder, closer, but stayed gentle, calm. I heard leaves being pushed aside, not shuffled like a deer would, not the quick snapping of a raccoon. This was slower, steady, then she stepped into view. She came through the fog like it parted for her. A woman, barefoot, dress hanging heavy with dew, dragging through the wet undergrowth. Long sleeves, pale fabric, not white but not far off. Hair dark and loose around her shoulders. She walked with her head tilted slightly forward, eyes downcast. She didn't look at me, didn't flinch, just moved past the edge of my camp like I wasn't there at all. I couldn't speak at first. My mouth went dry. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It was something deeper, older, like I'd stepped into a memory that didn't belong to me. Finally, I found my voice. I asked, "Are you lost?" She didn't stop, didn't turn, just kept walking. Her footsteps made no sound on the wet leaves, and then, clear as if she was standing behind me, I heard her voice say, "I'm always here." I spun around, flashlight sweeping through fog and branches, catching only mist and the silver gleam of wet bark, but she was gone. I never heard her walk away, just vanished into the thick grey. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. When dawn finally broke, it didn't rise the way it should have. It just sort of seeped in, washing the fog into a pale blue milk. I packed up in a hurry, not bothering with breakfast. I wanted to shake it off, tell myself I'd imagined it, that it was just a dream stitched from bad sleep and shadows. But then I looked at the ground. There were my boot prints, sure enough. Same pattern as yesterday. But beside them, leading out of the trees and across the edge of camp, was a second set. Bare feet, small, arched, and walking backwards. I stood there staring at them for what felt like forever. My hands were shaking. The fog was lifting, but not fast enough. I took photos, though I didn't look at them for days. And then I left. I didn't hike out. I ran. I didn't talk about it for months. Tried to file it away as some weird thing, a misfired brain. But it's never really gone away. A couple weeks ago, I finally opened the photos on my phone. They were all blurry, too much mist, too much motion, except one. In the edge of one frame, just the corner, there's the hem of a pale dress. The rest of the shot is my tarp and the trees, but that edge, it's crisp, clear, like she was closer than I'd realized. And now, sometimes when I walk past mirrors late at night, I swear I hear that same tune, hummed slowly, like a lullaby I should have known, but didn't. And sometimes I wake up and find fog outside the window, even on dry nights. Sometimes I find faint smudges near the back door, like bare feet standing there. And sometimes I think what she meant wasn't that she's always there, but that now I am. Story 5. Something knocked from beneath the trail. I'd been hiking the Bluff Mountain Trail system near Doughton Park since I was a teenager. My granddad used to take me up there in the fall when the leaves turned to fire and gold, and the air carried that particular crispness you only get above 3,000 feet. He'd tell me stories, mostly harmless ones, about settlers and outlaws and miners who disappeared. Old mountain tales, nothing that ever stuck too deep. But I kept going back. Even after he passed, I'd take that trail every October. Same boots, same route, like some personal ritual. It felt honest, familiar, until last fall. There's a bend on the trail maybe 5 miles in, just past a rise in the ridge where the path hugs a steep slope. If you're not looking for it, you'll miss the way the sound changes when you walk across that stretch. I'd always noticed it. The way your footfalls go a little softer, more echo than crunch. I used to think it was just packed loam or the way the roots formed a kind of natural drumhead. You don't question every strange sound in the woods, or you'll never stop walking. That day had been uneventful. Cool breeze, overcast sky, barely saw another soul. Just me and the trees, and the sound of wind slipping through pine. But when I reached that bend and stepped over the soft patch, I heard something that stopped me mid-step. A knock, not sharp or sudden, just deliberate, slow. Like someone rapping their knuckles against the underside of a table. I froze, one foot still mid-air, like I was afraid to finish the step. And then came a second knock, then a third. Same rhythm, same pause between each one. I stepped back, heart thumping in my ears. I looked around, nobody, no movement in the trees, no birds. I knelt down and pressed my hand to the ground. I didn't feel anything. Then, without really thinking, I dropped to one knee and pressed my ear against the dirt. It was cold, damp, and then I heard it, muffled whispering. Not a voice I could make out, not even clear words, just a tone, a rhythm like someone talking low and fast, just on the other side of a wall. My scalp went tight. Every inch of me wanted to stand up and leave, but something kept me there, like I needed to understand it. Then the whispering stopped, and something scraped the dirt directly beneath me. It wasn't loud, just a soft drag, like fingers pulling through sand or nails brushing along wood grain. I stood up fast. The ground felt the same, but I could still feel it, whatever it was. Right below, waiting. I didn't walk after that. I ran. I didn't stop until I got back to the car, lungs burning, boots soaked in sweat and creek water. I didn't sleep well that night. Couldn't stop thinking about that sound, that pressure beneath the soil. So a few days later, I started digging, not with a shovel, on the computer. Pulled up old maps of the area, geological surveys, anything I could find. That part of the trail used to run near a logging camp in the early 1900s, but what caught my eye was a note on a 1940s surveyor map. An unmarked shaft, sealed, no operational record, no ownership listed, just a dot and the word subsidence risk. I kept going, found references to a small-scale mining operation that was never officially licensed, ran for maybe 5 years, shut down after a collapse killed 3 men. Supposedly sealed, no public records since. I don't know what got into me, but I went back. Mid-November, colder now. I brought a ground-penetrating scanner I borrowed from a friend who works construction. Told him I was checking for buried metal, didn't mention the knocking. Hiked out early, got to the bend, and swept the scanner in slow arcs across the soft patch of trail. It pinged, about 8 feet down, hollow cavity, irregular shape, big enough for a person to stand in. I didn't dig. I couldn't. Whatever was beneath that dirt didn't want to be uncovered. I marked it on GPS, then left. I haven't told anyone about it. The park's office wouldn't care. That trail isn't even on their winter maintenance list. They'd probably just blame erosion. But since then things have felt off. Not just in the woods, at home too. I started waking up between 3 and 4 a.m. every night, always with a dry throat and this heavy feeling in my chest, like someone had been whispering to me just before I opened my eyes. One night, I woke up and found dirt on my sheets, fine dust like trail silt. Could have been tracked in maybe. I tried to explain it away. But then the next morning, I found my boots by the front door with a smear of mud on the sole. I hadn't worn them in a week. I keep dreaming of that knock. Slow, rhythmic, like it's coming up through the floorboards now. I moved my bed away from the vent because I kept hearing something down there. Breathing maybe, or just the wind. I haven't been back to that trail since, but I check the satellite view once in a while. That section looks darker now, like the trees grow closer together. And last week, the patch where I scanned the ground looked different, discolored, like the earth shifted. I don't think it's sealed anymore. And sometimes, when I walk across my wooden porch late at night, I swear I feel the faintest knock rising from below. Not a warning, not a threat, just a reminder. Story 6, The Boy with the Drowned Voice. I was hiking alone up near Elk Shoals last spring, taking a few days off from work after a rough winter. I'd rented a cabin just outside of Lansing, a simple place, one of those old timber-frame spots with drafty windows and a sagging porch. But I wasn't looking for luxury, just quiet. I'd packed light, brought a paperback and some jerky, and planned to walk the new river trails and maybe fish a little if the water wasn't too cold. That whole stretch between the trail and the river always had a strange stillness to it. Not eerie at first, just undisturbed. Like whatever used to happen there had stopped a long time ago and the woods were still holding onto the silence. It was my second morning when I took the lower trail that followed the river bend. I'd stopped for a bit near a clearing where the path dipped toward the bank. The trees broke there, giving way to flat rock shelves and soft mud. You could hear the current pushing over the stones like a voice whispering something you'd forgotten. That's when I saw the boy. He was just standing there, maybe 10 feet ahead, right near the edge of the water. Barefoot, pale ankles crusted with sand. He looked to be about 12, maybe younger, wearing a faded t-shirt with a crooked neckline and corduroy pants rolled halfway up his shins. No coat, no shoes, just standing still with his arms hanging loose by his sides. His eyes were dark, but not in a spooky way, more like someone who hadn't slept in a long time. I called out to him, asked if he was okay. He didn't jump or run like I half expected. He turned his head slowly, looked right at me and said, "I'm waiting for my father." His voice wasn't what it should have been. It sounded wet, not like he had a cold or anything, more like the words were bubbling up through water. Each syllable came out muffled, like his throat was filled with something too thick to speak through. But he smiled after he said it. Not big, just a little curl of his lip, like he was glad someone was finally listening. I stepped closer and asked if he was lost. He nodded, then asked if I'd seen a man in a green coat. I said no, just me on the trail. He didn't look upset by that, just nodded again, slow and deliberate, then turned back toward the river. Before I could say anything else, he stepped forward, right into the water. It wasn't fast or sudden, no drama. He just walked in like the river was nothing more than tall grass. The water reached his knees, then his waist, and then his chest. I shouted, ran toward him, but by the time I got to the edge, he was gone. No splash, no movement, just still water curling around the stones like he'd never been there at all. I dove in, I didn't think so, just leapt. The water was colder than I expected, sharp and silty, and deep faster than it should have been. I thrashed around, calling out, reaching under the surface, but there was nothing. No bubbles, no clothing, no hand reaching back. I stayed in until my skin burned and my lungs begged me to stop. When I finally dragged myself out, shivering and scraping, I looked around the bank. There were no footprints, not even my own where I'd first seen him, just smooth, undisturbed mud. I went back to the cabin and wrapped myself in every blanket I had. Didn't hike the rest of the trip. Spent most of the next day staring out the window, trying to figure out how I was supposed to feel about it. Was it a shock, grief, embarrassment? A few days later, I stopped at the ranger station on my way out, mostly just to ask quietly if there'd been any kids reported missing. I didn't give too many details. I just said I thought I'd seen something strange near the water. The ranger, an older guy, heavy-set with a grey mustache and a face that didn't care for stories, asked where exactly I'd been. I told him near the stone flats below the bend, just past mile marker 12. He went quiet. Then he said, "You saw the boy." I didn't know what to say. He told me a kid had drowned there back in 71, flood season. The river swelled fast, caught a family camping too close. The boy went in, father chased after him. They never found the father, only the boy's jacket, snagged on a root downstream. Some folks, the ranger said, say they still hear him calling for his dad. I asked how many had seen him. He looked at me for a long time, then said, "More than you'd think. Not all of them tell anyone." I left after that, drove straight home. But the story hasn't left me, not really. Sometimes, when I hear running water, like the kitchen tap or the gutter after a storm, I hear that gurgling voice behind it, forming words just beneath the flow. I started having dreams too. Always the same. I'm standing at the river and the boy is there looking over his shoulder. But in the dream, I never see his face fully. Just a blur where his features should be. And standing behind him on the far side of the water is a man in a green coat. Motionless, watching me. I wake up with the sound of rushing water in my ears and my bedsheets cold, like they've been soaked through. I haven't gone near a river since. But I think he remembers me. Story 7. She wore a mask of birch bark. I was hiking alone in the Linville Gorge region, late October, right when the air first turned sharp and the sun fell faster than you expect. I'd done this stretch of trail a couple of times before. Remote, but manageable, mostly flat, with one good overlook if you made camp around mile 8. That was the plan. Hike till dusk, sleep under the stars, then push through the rest the next day. I wasn't in any kind of rush, just needed to be somewhere quiet. I'd been wound up for weeks and thought maybe the woods could settle me. That's usually what they do. It was about an hour before sunset when I saw her. I'd just come around a bend where the trees broke into a clearing, the light slanting low and golden across the trail. She was sitting cross-legged beneath a crooked pine, maybe 10 feet off the path, still as stone. I thought at first it was some kind of sculpture or trail art. There's a few of those along this stretch. Little stone stacks or hung bundles of dried leaves. But as I got closer, I realized it was a person. She wasn't facing me directly. Her head was tilted slightly downward, as if looking at her own hands resting on her lap. What struck me immediately was the mask. Her face was covered in overlapping sheets of birch bark, like paper-thin scales stitched together at the corners with rough, black thread. The stitching ran across where her eyes would have been. There were no holes, no openings. It was crude work, jagged and too tight in some places, gaping in others, like whoever made it didn't care much for symmetry. Her hair, long, dark, matted, spilled out from beneath it like it had been wet and dried hard. She didn't move, didn't flinch, just sat there, like she'd been waiting. I slowed but didn't stop. I don't know why. I guess I didn't want to acknowledge her. Maybe part of me thought it was performance art or some strange ritual thing I didn't want to interrupt. So I kept walking, kept my eyes down, didn't say a word. The silence was thick, too thick for dusk. No insects, no birds. Another mile down the trail, I made camp near a rocky outcrop where I could see the gorge below. I ate a cold dinner and tried not to think about her. Told myself it was a prank, some oddball spiritual thing I wasn't meant to understand. But even then, I couldn't shake the stillness of her. How she didn't twitch or shift or scratch at her leg, just sat. Around an hour later, just as the light dropped out completely, I left camp to relieve myself. Walked a short way back toward the trail to find a flat spot, and there she was, again, standing this time, right in the middle of the trail, arms at her sides. The bark mask still on, head tilted slightly, Not toward me, but just enough that it felt like she was listening, like she'd been waiting to be heard. I stopped cold. I could hear my own breath, my own heartbeat. She didn't move, didn't speak. But the longer I looked at her, the more I felt like something was wrong with the way the mask sat. It wasn't just that it covered her face, it was that it pressed into it, like it had been sewn directly to her skin. That's when the smell hit me. Faint, but there, sweet and iron-rich. Old blood, the kind you smell in butcher shops or when you cut your palm on rusty wire. I stepped back. She didn't follow, didn't react at all, but I felt something change, like the woods around her leaned inward. Like the silence was pushing toward her, like she drew stillness into herself. I turned and ran, back to camp. I grabbed my pack, left the rest behind. Didn't bother packing the tarp. I took the trail back, moving fast, too fast for the dark. My flashlight bobbing wildly as I half ran, half tripped through switchbacks and roots. Every now and then I thought I heard movement behind me, soft steps maybe, but when I stopped, there was nothing. Just that damned silence. I made it to the trailhead just before midnight, slept in the back seat of my car with the dome light on and the windows up. I didn't dream, just stared at the ceiling until morning broke through the fogged glass. I came back 2 days later with a ranger. Told him I'd seen someone acting strangely out there, didn't give details, just said it felt wrong. We hiked the loop, found nothing, no sign of her, no sign of my tarp or pack, not even footprints. But when we reached the clearing near the crooked pine, something caught my eye. On the tree where she'd been sitting, strips of birch bark hung in curling threads, some stained dark, some clean, all cut in narrow sheets like parchment, and embedded in the bark itself, deep grooves like fingernails, had been pressed into the wood over and over. The ranger didn't say much, just nodded and muttered something about old trails attracting strange people. But that night, I found something stuck to the sole of my boot, just a scrap, a small strip of bark, no bigger than a playing card, with one black stitch through it, like it had torn loose from a seam. I burned it in the sink, but the smell didn't go away, and now, sometimes, when I walk through the woods alone, I get that same sense, like something is waiting, just off the trail, listening, holding its breath. And when the wind dies completely, when the forest forgets to breathe, I swear I hear a soft rustling behind me, like bark dragging over skin. Story 8. I saw myself sleeping in the clearing. It was early October when I decided to do the loop through Stone Hollow Ridge, not a popular trail, even among locals, partially overgrown, poorly marked, and with just enough lore around it that folks stayed clear. Stories about disappearances, time slips, all that campfire stuff. But I wasn't looking for ghosts. I just needed space, a bad breakup, a job that was slowly killing me, and the kind of quiet you can't buy with white noise and blackout curtains. The plan was to go in light, just my tarp, stove, and bag, and spend 2 nights off the main spine. I figured I'd make camp near the cedar grove just past mile 10. I'd been there once before in high school. It stuck with me. That ring of old cedar packed in close like a fence line, the kind of place where sound never quite makes it out. It felt held somehow, contained. That first day, the hike went easy. Cool air, soft wind, and not another soul for miles. I hit the grove by mid-afternoon, dropped my pack, and made a small camp just off the trail, maybe 30 yards from the clearing. I didn't bother with a fire, just cooked over the stove, ate quickly, and crawled into my bag as the light died. Everything was quiet. No birdsong, no insect hum, just wind in the high trees. I fell asleep fast, the kind of sleep that feels deep but has a surface tension, thin, brittle, like your brain is waiting for a reason to snap awake. Around midnight, I heard footsteps. Not rustling, not animal movement. Footsteps. Deliberate, steady, soft, but too even to be random. I froze. My tarp was open on one side, staked in an A-frame. I could see the edge of the clearing through the gap, moonlight casting just enough to paint the ferns in silver outlines. My first thought was deer, maybe a bear. But bears don't walk in rhythm. And deer don't wear boots. The sound wasn't crunching leaves either, more like the gentle press of weight on damp ground. I reached slowly for my headlamp but didn't turn it on, just held it, palm sweating. I waited, then I saw movement. At first, I couldn't make out what I was looking at, just a lump in the clearing that hadn't been there before. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, and focused. My stomach was cold. It was a sleeping bag, just like mine. Grey-blue exterior, faded orange trim. Same one I'd had for years. The pack beside it, same model, same color. I even had the duct tape on the side pocket where it tore last summer. Whoever it was had copied me exactly, or it was me. The shape inside the bag was unmistakably human, curled slightly to the side, chest rising and falling in slow, even breaths. A single arm resting outside the bag, hand limp on the dirt. I felt something primal stir in me, an instinct so old and deep it didn't have words. My whole body screamed to stay still. I stared for what felt like an hour. The figure didn't move, just breathed. I kept telling myself it had to be a trick of the light, a mirage, some hikers with the same gear. But the longer I looked, the more I recognized things no stranger would have mimicked. There was a scar on my cheek, left side, small and curved like a hook. I got it falling off a bike when I was 9. It was on him. I could see it when the moonlight hit just right. That's when the breathing stopped. The figure sat up. Not fast, not robotic, just sat up. Smoothly, naturally. But it wasn't natural. Because when he sat up, he didn't look around, didn't seem startled by the noise or the night. He just turned his head slowly and looked directly at me. My heart slammed against my ribs. I didn't breathe, couldn't. His face, my face, was blank. Not emotionless, not empty, just blank, like someone waiting for you to speak first. The eyes weren't wide or crazed, just mine, calm, familiar. That, more than anything, rattled me. We stared at each other across the clearing. Neither of us moved. I don't know how long it lasted, but something inside me broke. Not a scream or a run, just a slow crumbling of logic. I backed down into my bag and closed my eyes. I told myself over and over that this wasn't happening, that it was a dream, that it had to be, that I was still asleep and would wake up in my own bed with traffic outside and everything real again. I don't remember falling asleep or packing. But I remember waking up 3 miles down the trail. No tarp, no stove. Just my sleeping bag, half unzipped and damp from frost. My pack was beside me, but light. Most of my gear was gone. I was on the edge of a switchback I hadn't reached yet. I recognized the curve of the slope, the birch leaning out like it was listening. It didn't make sense. I was too far from the grove, and my feet ached like I'd hiked all night. There were no signs of struggle, no bruises, no cuts. But my boots were laced in a way I don't do, double-knotted, tight, like someone else tied them for me. I walked out that day. No food, no water, just a straight push to the trailhead. I passed 2 hikers on their way in. They said I looked pale and asked if I needed help. I lied, said I'd just pushed too hard, didn't tell them what happened. I still haven't told anyone, really. But some nights, I dream of that clearing. I see the copy, me, still sitting upright in the moonlight, watching, breathing, waiting. Sometimes I think he's still out there, and I wonder if I really made it out, or if I'm the one lying in the clearing now, breathing, still, waiting for someone else to look through the tarp and see me staring back.